So my new book, Islamic Pacifism, Global Muslims in the Post-Osama Era, is actually meant for both Muslims and non-Muslims alike. First, for non-Muslims, whenever they hear the term Islamic pacifism, that tends to usually, give them a moment of pause. For many people who tend to equate Islam and Muslims with anything having to do with violence or extremism, some people ask, is Islamic pacifism a paradox? And it's actually not. And so, obviously in my book, I highlight not only the major golden rule teachings of Islam, but also highlight major Islamic pacifists from the 20th century. For the Muslim community, I want this book to help start a conversation. It's one of those things, it's not meant to be, an answer to all of the Muslim community's ills, but it's meant to help move the ball moving in the right direction. I want to give young Muslim girls and boys around the world essentially the opportunity to feel empowered in helping to reclaim our own narrative. The meta-narrative on Islam and Muslims after 9/11 has been dominated by people who are not Muslims. And so, hopefully, our next generation of young writers from all over the world will help to reclaim that narrative in terms of their own personal experiences to show the diversity and the fact that Islam and Muslims are not a monolithic entity. So, it's a pretty cumbersome task. And again, my book is just one small ripple in that direction. But hopefully, it's meant to start a conversation from all sides of the political and global aisle. My whole life, actually, motivated me to write this book. As you probably know, since the moment of 9/11, I've essentially spent, the better part of 10 years, within the media, both here domestically in the United States and globally as well, having to deal with all the major issues affecting the global Muslim community. So whether it was the Danish cartoon controversy, the Bali, Madrid, London bombings, Quran burnings, Guantanamo Bay. I've actually not only had to deal with all of these issues, but I've had to deal with them within the public domain. And what motivated me was the fact that, I had never seen an entire post 9/11 narrative history written by somebody from within the Muslim community. So, again, we've always had things written about us. And so I thought many years ago that this was going to be something important to give a narrative history from within the Muslim community. And so that's probably the biggest motivator in writing the book. Well, I think that everybody, whether you're working in medicine or engineering or law or environmentalism or academia or journalism, I think we can all do our own part to help humanize Muslims to the greater society at large. I think that, one of the reasons we see a rising level of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim sentiment is because people don't know Muslims. They're not humanized to them. I think once people see us as, contributing members of society in all areas, to show people that Muslims aren't one-trick ponies, that we don't, just need to talk about religion or terrorism, that we're as contributing members of society as anyone else. I always tell people that, Dave Chappelle, the funniest dude in America, is a Muslim. And that tends to, give people they're surprised because they don't tend to associate comedy and Muslim in the same sentence. I think that the Arab Spring was a perfect example of how nonviolent civil disobedience can work and has worked in the Muslim and Arab world. What's interesting to note, and a lot of people don't know, is that, for example, the Egyptian pro-democracy movements that happened in Tahrir Square, the organizers actually reached out to their counterparts in Serbia during members of the Otpor movement. The Otpor movement was the nonviolent civil disobedience movement that helped to overthrow Serbian dictator Slobodan Milosevic. And actually, PBS Frontline did a great documentary about how the Muslim activists in Tahrir Square reached out to their Serbian counterparts via Skype, and they actually used that same mechanisms and methodology in Tahrir Square as well. And so, again, I think it shows that our next generation of young Muslim girls and boys around the world, again, we're more interconnected via social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We tend to be more open-minded and pluralistic. And so, I have a great deal of hope in the future generation of Muslims and Arabs around the world in using nonviolent civil disobedience anywhere around the world to help attain political change. Sure, I think it's important that, at the end of the day here in the United States, all Americans have the presumption of innocence. We're innocent until we're proven guilty. Sadly, however, in the post 9/11 world that we live in, American Muslims, Arab South Asians have essentially had a presumption of guilt placed upon them, where we essentially are guilty until we prove ourselves to be innocent. And this NYPD, spying probe is something that is quite, indicative of that. I think, the analogy that I always give people is that, imagine that the NYPD was spying on the Black community or the Latino community or the Jewish community. I think the uproar against that sort of action would be unanimous. But again, because there is a level of anti-Muslim sentiment, people tend to think, okay, well, we can relegate Muslims to second-class status in the United States and still sort of be okay with that. I think, when we have reports, saying that, the NYPD sent people on whitewater rafting trips. My response is always, well, why don't we send them to Muslim preschools so they can go to Chuck E. Cheese on field trips and see if there's any terrorist skee-ball that's being played. It's where do we draw the line? I think what we have to do as proud Americans is point out the absurdity of actions like this. Not only is the NYPD spying on people, they're spying on people outside of their own jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So, even New Jersey Governor Cory Booker, who's a Democrat, and Republican Governor from New Jersey, Chris Christie, both condemned the NYPD's actions. And so I think, again, because, Muslims are doing a much better job now in terms of getting out into the public domain. So I think that's why it's important for Muslims, as American Muslims, to help speak out on civil rights issues, even when it doesn't affect our community. So whether it's comprehensive immigration reform or LGBT rights or other church-state issues, we have to be at the forefront with other minorities, with other people of color to speak out, so that when things like the NYPD spying probe do happen, that people will be confident enough and our allies enough to speak out on our behalf as well. I think what's important for people to take away from this conversation is that the civil rights history of America, primarily during the 20th century, has always demonized minority groups. Since at the turn of the 20th century, Italian and German Americans were vilified. Catholic Americans, during the whole phenomenon of gangs in New York, which was made famous by Martin Scorsese film. World War II, we had 140,000 Japanese Americans who were interned in internment camps. The African American civil rights movement, which started in Jim Crow America, continues to this very day. The post 9/11 civil rights movement that we're seeing now is only the next chapter. We're only the next page in a very, very large civil rights history book of America. And tomorrow it'll be somebody after us. And so, we need to make sure that, we embed ourselves within the American culture to the point where we can not only empower our own community, but, further strengthen the American social fabric of the United States. And I think, this post 9/11 world that we live in is a time and an era where, all Americans of all different backgrounds and races and religions and ethnicities can band together for a better America. And I think that hopefully with my book, Islamic Pacifism, that will help start a conversation both from within the Muslim community and outside the community as well on how we can help ensure that we can help promote religion in a way that is only used for good. Where we all, strive for the betterment of our own selves as individuals and for betterment of all of humanity as well, regardless of anybody's race, religion, or socioeconomic status.